Hello and welcome back to DCU Daily. And today we have some mudslinging going on, is I think the best way that I could put it, because I read this article that Variety put out, which generated headlines all over the internet media and Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, wherever, whichever social you're on, media platform you're on, Threads, sure, or X, I guess, not Twitter anymore. Everywhere, like they're talking about Aquaman 2 worries. The movie's not very looking good. Amber Heard almost got fired, and then Elon Musk sent a letter, and then like, oh, James Wan wasn't nice to her, and then other things like, oh, they're supposedly all the Justice League actors from Zack Snyder's version of the DC are getting recast. Oh, Warner Brothers might be getting sold to Universal in a couple of years, supposedly. And oh, maybe the DC studio heads and the people at Max, the two heads of Max, like that, maybe their collaboration isn't entirely smooth because we don't know who the ultimate gatekeepers are of the DC series that are going to be on Max, like the Penguin. Like all of this stuff that just, like, initially I was like, whoa, what is going on? Like, because I first saw this in like an email newsletter that I get like on a daily basis from one of these other websites, and then like I got a couple, it's filled with like three DC headlines and like five other things, and then what made me click onto one of the articles was like the, oh, Warner Brothers might be getting sold to Universal in a couple of years. And I was like, I found out like that's a little bit like out of nowhere, considering that Discovery just bought them, and they've put so much time and effort into, like, obviously try to rehabilitate a lot of these brands and put themselves on a path towards profitability. Discovery went from being a company that had billions of dollars, like they were in the green, they were debt free, and they took on billions of dollars in debt to acquire Warner Brothers, and now they're doing everything that they can financially speaking. So I'm like, it wouldn't make any sense to then just turn around. And this is not the first time they've speculated something like this. But that's the bigger picture. Like when you dive into the DC front proper, there's just a lot in this article that, it's doesn't make any sense to me because it just seems like it's just a lot of mudslinging going on. And this article is probably the best or the biggest example of saying a whole hell of a lot without saying basically nothing at all, because a lot of the big headlines that got generated from this one article, again, because, I mean, it's a big Variety article, great, it's Variety, it's one of the, the trades, and you got to trust their sources and blah blah blah. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying that what they're putting out here is false information. I'm just saying that they're not exactly providing, like, a lot of detail. They're just sort of like, there's a lot of like pieces that people might think were huge news pieces, like the Justice League recasting, like everybody, not just Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck, but also Gal Gadot and Ray Fisher and Ezra Miller, and I'm like, some of that stuff is already sort of known and understood. It's like an unsaid, that kind of a thing, but it's not been made official from James Gunn, and this article doesn't have any official statement from anybody like significant like a James Gunn. It just has like two sentences, and then people just took that and blew it up into, oh my god, it's confirmed, like, and it's just everywhere. So John, like, you read this article, and
Yep.
before I keep like rambling on about like why I found this article to be like just just kind of superfluous, and if anything like an attempt at, I don't know, like kicking DC maybe when they're down, and that maybe I'm a little biased here because I'm a big fan of DC, but it
Right.
definitely, like, because the article itself has like two points, two places in the article where a DC spokesperson is refuting the claims made by supposedly Amber Heard during her, trial, or the documents she submitted through her therapist. So what did you think about this article? What were your first thoughts? And I know we're going to go through this like on a more of a detailed basis, like
Right.
point by point almost. But like before we get into it, what were your initial reactions to this article?
It just felt like it really felt like someone f- from a non-official news source like Twitter or X or whatever it's called, like heard from like a game of telephone, like this person said to this person said to this person said to this person. Oh, and that's where I got my source from. It just feels like everyone's blowing hot air, and it just feels like, oh, it's all just like every single piece of information once. If it was about one or two of things, I wouldn't say it's automatically believable, but the fact that like it's about like 10 different things, because I didn't read the whole article. I just kept getting snippets of headlines, as you mentioned. I kept getting snippets of like,
Yeah.
oh, this thing, oh, this thing, oh, this thing. And then when we were talking about it, it was like, oh, was this in the article? Was this in the article? Oh, yeah, all these like 20 different stories that leaked
Mhm.
out from this were from the same article. It's like, okay, then
Yeah.
that kind of almost makes it a little bit less refutable in a way because it just feels like just slinging anything at the wall to see what would stick in terms of any news story. I did hear like and we'll get into it when we into it. Like some things before this article came out, like some rumors. I'm not saying that those are true, but there was a little bit more viability, I guess, in terms of a couple things. But a lot of this is like feels like blowing hot air. And considering that Aquaman 2, even outside of this article, had the behind the scenes of that has been rickety, um, that it's like any sort of publicity is good publicity, like,
Yeah, but
maybe, but it's just
yeah.
but even then, it feels a little bit as you said, it feels, like, too mean-spirited even for that. So, like, I don't get what the point of this was. Is it just like a super Marvel fan just being like, "You know what? I'll just post this, see what happens."
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not cynical enough to say this was something that like a Marvel fan wrote
No, I know, I'm
necessarily,
just joking around.
but like, but yeah, yeah, but like, but what I would say is, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of information in this article. They jump around a lot. They just kind of randomly go into these weird like sidebars, or like they're talking about this
Yeah,
one big subject for 2 paragraphs, and then randomly there's one paragraph with like 2 sentences about, oh, by the way, in fact, or in the article they say in fact, and we'll go through it, like that the Justice League is not getting recast. They're all getting recast, and they're just gonna move on. Oh, and by the way, insiders told us that say that Warner's might be bought by Universal in a couple of years anyway. I'm like, who are these insiders? Are these like some disgruntled employees? Are they senior like VPs in the company, or is
right.
is that the person who works in the cafeteria and maybe he overheard a conversation from some people who walked down one day and had
Yeah,
lunch at
that's what
the
it
on
feels
the
like,
lot?
that's what
Like
it feels like.
I just like I don't know. Like it's and again, like part of this is like, okay, so you're reading this in Variety, like there's an expectation of quality, and not just in terms of like the copy editing and just the content alone, but also the sources. Like you're expecting that the information you're getting here, when they say our sources tell us this, you're not getting our sources tell us this from some like random online website where somebody's quoting something and they're like, ah, don't worry about the source, a source told us this, just trust us. Like
Yeah,
there's like these the writers on these trade sites are meant to have that level of how should we say, they're meant to have this level of credibility, and so to that end, I'm like, okay, like I'm not saying this article is hot garbage, because there is some new information and some good analysis in here,
mhm,
but like without further ado, let's just get into it, because I think it would be better if we just kind of addressed it point by point.
right,
So here's like, so I kind of divided this up, and there's a lot to go through. So we'll start with this, which is like early on in the article. Then this is like one of probably the biggest things that we have been seeing online, like the whole thing about Jason Momoa like dressing up like Johnny Depp apparently, and supposedly harassing Amber Heard on set, and then like in her notes from her therapist for Amber Heard, apparently she told her notes, sorry, she told her therapist that Jason said he wanted me fired, and Jason drunk late on set, dressing like Johnny, has all the Johnny Depp in this case has all the rings too, and I was like, but I'm like, I can almost imagine. Not just imagine. We've seen Jason Momoa just dressed like that, and that's his like
yeah,
style. And then this is like in the article, you see that there's a DC spokesperson who just basically pushed back on that characterization, saying that, hey, Jason Momoa conducted himself in a professional manner at all times on the set of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. Others echoed that sentiment, and then he or she also said, the spokesperson, that Jason works his ass off, likes to have a beer once in a while, like everyone, but doesn't show up drunk to set. And then another insider, added that the two stars got along and were seen joking together, like Amber Heard and Jason Momoa. Which I'm like, of course, like they filmed the whole freaking movie together. If they hated each other, I mean, we would have probably known about it like before
right,
this. And then this insider said that, and he isn't dressing like Johnny Depp. He has always dressed in that bohemian uh, style. And by the way, a rep from Momoa declined comment. So it's, to
yeah,
me, like when you read this, it tells me this, like, a that the fact that, and this is the pattern in this article, none of the reps from none of the people that they're talking about in this article have made any comments. The only
Yeah.
time we see like the like somebody has responded for like to request a comment, there's twice, and they're both times they're DC spokesperson. And so I feel like this is something where Warner Brothers maybe either got ahead of it, or certainly they caught up to it, and the PR department has sort of clamped down. Plus, also the story being out there and all the negative press that has kind of sunk their recent DC projects. Like I'm sure like everybody on the Aquaman team already was on like high alert regarding the fact that, hey, don't talk to the press. We do not want to like spread all this negative like hype around the film. So I can imagine those all those factors played into the fact that none of the major players that are mentioned in this article, from James Gunn all the way to Amber Heard, none of them have like none of the reps and none of the studio reps have made any comments. The only time we see that is the two DC spokespeople. But like to just to kind of talk about this whole Jason Momoa potentially like harassing Amber Heard on, and I was like, what does that even make sense to you? Like, do you? Because I to me like Jason Momoa is not. He's not like I've never heard anything about that. Like I like that about him. Like he's not
Yeah.
seen. He doesn't have a reputation as somebody who's disruptive on set, or who. I mean, he's got that like childlike energy that he kind of radiates with, which
Oh
I think
yeah,
is
of
always
course.
seen as a positive. And he's always like anytime you see behind the scenes clips and stuff too, and you hear about it in the press, it's like he's great to work with. He's great to get along with. He's full of smiles and jokes and everything, but he's never known to be like like when we were getting those Jared Leto news from the Suicide Squad, for example, when he was like sending these weird gifts to his cast members because he was in
Yeah.
his way method acting, like supposedly. We've never had anything like that with Jason Momoa. So like out of nowhere, it seems like these accusations are coming in, and then of course the DC spokesperson denies it, and the fact
Mhm.
that they made a comment on this point while not really addressing a lot of those other points in this article tells me that this is one place where they're like, yeah, we're not gonna like let Jason Momoa get wrapped up into a scandal because he's the lead of a big movie that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on that's about to come out. But like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think this is something that Jason Momoa like his? Do you think like how he was described like as harassing potentially Amber Heard? Like, I don't think that would be the case.
I remember hearing rumors that this was a thing, like, he dressed up as Johnny Depp and was, like, kinda making fun of her, but, like, nothing, like, mean. It was probably I don't think he would show up to set drunk, and I don't think he would, um, like, be, like, mean. Maybe he was, like, kinda, like, joking around, like, making light of it, but even then, because
Yeah,
like, I feel like that's something he might do, like, kinda make light of it to, like, make the set a little bit lighter after this, like, whole
yeah,
stressful trial happened, like, and maybe at the very most, but even then, that's kind of pushing. I don't think he would, like, again, he's like this big star, and if this is true, showing up drunk and all this stuff, like, why would he do that? Like, he's this big star of this franchise. He's like doing all this stuff. It's just like, and again, as you said, it's out of the
it's
ordinary. He
yeah,
wouldn't, I feel like he wouldn't do this. I feel like it's kind of maybe, and if it is, like, true in a way, like, if it's, and especially if it's Amber Heard's therapist, it would probably be her embellishing certain aspects. I mean, we know that, like, she's not above lying about certain things, so it's entirely
yeah,
possible she's just embellishing some stuff to for whatever reason. And I don't think Jason Momoa would do this. Now, again, we don't know him personally, so it's entirely possible maybe he does have a dark side. Maybe he does would do something this messed up, and like with the stress of the Aquaman 2 shoot, maybe, but it just seems pretty unlikely that he would just go this far this quickly and this out of nowhere. That
yeah.
just feels awkward, I
Yeah,
guess,
it
in
just
a
it
way.
just to me like that all of that read completely like everything else in the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, but nothing to do with Jason Momoa as a person himself. It just felt like he was getting like again, like you said, all of that stuff was being exaggerated for the sake of the trial, seemingly at least, or to kind of like make that case. And then that thing, like I'm like the stench of that whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard drama should like be as far away from this Aquaman movie as humanly
Mm.
possible, because like any you get even the slightest bit of that, like, stench on this movie, and it's like it sticks with it. And then with the recent DC movies all having drama around them, it may be like the exception of like Blue Beetle, which I guess, like, it's like, when they say like, or I think Churchill once upon a time said that quantity has a quality all unto its all of its own. And I felt like with Blue Beetle, like it had all the scandals leading up to the previous DC movies, that quantity of negative press had a quality all to its own that kind of sunk Blue Beetle as well, even though Blue Beetle itself as a movie didn't have anything like that going on. But
Right.
yeah, with this one, with the Aquaman movie, I'm like, it's we there's anything we can possibly do to kind of create separation there. Like, and I guess I'm speaking on behalf of, like, I'm sure Warner Brothers is thinking the same thing. But yeah, I just don't think like this is an accurate characterization of who Jason Momoa is. Like, he's worked on so many other films. Like, he was in Fast X this year. He's in other franchises. He's showing up all over the place. He had his own TV show on Apple TV Plus. I'm like, where were the reports of him showing up drunk to those projects? Like, where is this like coming? Like, and again, like, you look at the source of where this is all coming from. It's coming from a therapist's notes where Amber Heard was describing her experience to her therapist, which then got brought up in a court case. And I'm like, it's by definition, that's you're looking at somebody's opinion or perception of a situation rather than some objective truth. So
Yeah.
yeah, let's keep going. I mean, there's a lot to get through here. So Momoa isn't the only Aquaman principal to land in the crosshairs, and as they said in this article, and apparently during our therapy sessions, Amber Heard also talked about James Wan, the director of the two Aquaman movies, and like saying like, "Oh, he raised his voice at me. I can't even post about Aquaman. It made it like it was my fault. I said I'm sorry, and nobody could take selfies with me on set given the blackout." I'm like, a, I'm like, there's PR here at work, like, which makes complete sense, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and then even later, like, in this, and I'll go through like what I think about this, but like the DC spokesperson again declines here, like the characterization, like basically refuting it and saying James is known for treating members of his cast and crew with the utmost respect and for fostering a positive collaborative environment on set. The Aquaman films were no exception. Like, it's a very firm refutement of like whatever Amber Heard said about James Wan. There's no like gray area here about like what the DC spokesperson is saying. And yeah, when she talks about the blackout and stuff, I'm like, look, you're having this high profile like court battle with your ex that happened in two different countries, that is all over the media, that has become like a source of memes and whatever else. Like, it's do you really does it like wouldn't you shouldn't you understand that like the studio would not want all of that drama to be attached to a project that they've got millions of dollars invested in, because it
Right.
would negatively harm that project. I'm like, that's just common sense. I'm like, you gotta
Yeah.
like, think of it from the studio side of point of view. You gotta think of it from the point of view of the thousands of other people on the project, including your fellow cast member, the director, and anybody else, like the producers and the people who are putting up the money for this project. They don't want this thing to fail because your drama got in the way. If I was in that
Right.
situation, I'd be like, you know what? Like, I'm just gonna be like out of your way. I'll do my part, and then like, let's hope things work out. I'm sorting this out in my own life. I don't want any of that to kind of have any sort of connection to this. Like, have that separation. And it just seems like here again, we're just like, this article kind of gives a lot of platform to this kind of like mudslinging, which then it just kind of uses, it seems like the article itself then kind of uses that as a platform to be like, then dive into these other tangents. Speaking of which, then this is where we get into the first big tangent of the article, which is, in fact, quote unquote, in fact, none of the stars cast by Zack Snyder for 2016's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice and 2017's Justice League, including Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Gal Gadot, Ezra Miller, and Momoa. They don't even mention Ray Fisher because I think at this point nobody believes he's coming back, because of all his beef with everybody at DC. Um, well, minus Zack Snyder. But like none of the like this, the article says that none of them will reprise their roles in the new DC universe and character. Momoa may return, and again, here's another bombshell. Supposedly, Momoa may return, just not as Aquaman. Sources say the actor has engaged in talks to play Lobo either in the 2025 reboot Superman Legacy or in a standalone film. And then they talk about it in a confusing twist, and then they go through the whole the three actors we already know: John Cena, Viola Davis, and Joel Duena, who are moving forward in the new DCU, playing the same characters as their old DCU versions. But
Mhm.
the point, like, I'm just like, okay, maybe I'm nitpicking here, and I probably am. But like when they say in fact, they make it seem like it's a definitive thing, that there's been an official announcement. And to be fair, they have officially said Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill are not coming back. But what they
Yes.
haven't officially said is whether Jason Momoa, Ezra Miller, or Gal Gadot, or even to that end, Ray Fisher, are coming back or not in their roles from the previous DCU. That's not been said anywhere officially. Like James Gunn hasn't said that on his threads. James Gunn hasn't announced that anywhere else. They didn't say that at the DCU slate announcement. None of that was made official. None of that has made. There's no press release that has been put out since. David Zaslav hasn't mentioned it. Nobody like who's in any position of influence over this matter has officially made any statements about that. And that's why
Right.
the confusion still sort of persists. Like, are we getting a Wonder Woman 3 or are we not getting a Wonder Woman 3 with Gal Gadot? And Gal Gadot seems to think we are, like, or at least back in June she did. But James Gunn hasn't, like, again, he has had months to kind of say, no, sorry, Gal was wrong. I think she was confused. We told her we're not doing it. Like he could have said that, but like there's nothing like that happened. So, and then you said, like, so that you first came across articles talking about exactly this part, these like tangents that people then blow up and run with them as like their matter of
Yeah.
fact news pieces. Like, so, and to me that's just like, it's just, it's like a game of telephone, like you said. Like that's just not. I just don't get it. Like, what do you think about the way this is written? And again, it's just one paragraph, and then they move on to like other tangents past this.
Yeah. It's just like the one big game of telephone. It just seems like making news for making news sake. Like, I mean, we knew Cavill and Affleck weren't coming back. We knew Ray Fisher wasn't coming back after he pretty much blacklisted himself because he, wanted to have toxic people pay for their BS.
Yeah,
So he was like, all right, I don't care. And he's like, all right, I'll just continually work with Zack Snyder because that's how he set himself up, which is sad. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but,
yeah,
accountability over entertainment, right? So, I mean, that was pretty much that. Ray Fisher, we knew was coming back. Ezra Miller is, well, a criminal, so it's
yeah.
kind of
Although, like, hey, look, to be
obvious that
fair, he hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, he hasn't been officially indicted, but like
officially been indicted, but like, yeah, court of public opinion, I
court of
guess you could
public
say.
opinion, yes. And
Um,
to be fair, like James Gunn and Peter Safran, every time they've been asked about him, I mean, they kept
they kind of
saying,
dodged the subject.
yeah, they were like, "Oh, he's focusing. They're focusing on their recovery right now, and
Yes.
we'll, like, when the time comes, basically, and whenever the time comes. I mean, and there's no Flash project, at least not. I mean, maybe the Flash is gonna show up in the crossover. Maybe they're a different version of the Flash. Like one of
Yeah.
the classic versions of the Flash might show up instead of the Barry Allen version in the DCU before. Like, Guy Gardner is the first version of the Green Lantern we're gonna see, not John Stewart or Hal Jordan. So
Right.
it could just be that they're just like, if we wait 5 years and there's no Flash project until, like, and then maybe like Ezra Miller's in a better spot. I mean, maybe, or maybe they're like, in 5 years we'll make a
Yeah.
decision. Like, why do we have to worry? Oh, same could be for Wonder Woman. Like, same deal with Gal Gadot.
Yeah, it's all just
So
it's all
yeah,
it's all just blowing smoke, and then there's also the thing that, oh, Jason Momoa has been fired as Aquaman, he's gonna come back as Lobo, which I get, like, that's been like a fan cast for a while because he
it's
has like the perfect
yeah,
body and demeanor for it. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to see the man as Lobo. He's perfect for the role.
yeah,
But again, that's like it just
yeah.
makes the article even less and less
And you know what
credible
it
because
is?
that's,
The what I didn't like about this, and you're right, like the whole less credible, it makes it less credible, not just because they're just like saying in kind of like these little brief sentences, and before like going on to like trying to drop another bombshell about another claim that this article makes, such as the Justice League thing. Um, they didn't really touch upon any of the pieces of news pertaining to that whole situation that have come out in the past year that are like relevance. And I know you can only cover so much in an article. This article already has 20,000 different things to talk about. So adding another five things is only going to like add to the word count. But I do remember like very clearly, and you guys, you can search this up on James Gunn's Twitter or X account or Instagram or Threads, and Jason Momoa's as well. that when the rumors first started circulating, Jason Momoa was hinting at it. I'm a big comic book collector, and one of the bug. You guys know one of the biggest ones I have always collected. If you know about me, then you can find out very easily by searching about me. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then at the same time, he also made a statement saying, like, around the same time, that, oh, I'm always going to be Aquaman, like that's my character, like very specifically saying that. And then the post-credit
Right.
scene in the Flash, they sort of hint that in no matter which universe they go to, Jason Momoa is like, the Batman changes, but Jason Momoa is always like what Aquaman looks like.
Right.
Like we might get George Clooney or Michael Keaton or Ben Affleck as Batman. um, Aquaman is always the same. At least they hinted at it, which, by the way, was a scene that they shot pretty late in the game to replace a different scene with Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle's
Yeah.
Batgirl, and not Batgirl, Supergirl and Batman coming in. So like it seems, and then counterproductive to kind of mention this and then not kind of provide the detail. And also, like, James Gunn has never confirmed this. He's
Yeah.
never confirmed it either way. Which, again, like, I'll be honest with you, like, there may just be that this is all entirely true. But they can't say anything about it until this, because they got a freaking new Aquaman movie coming out. Like, it's already lame duck as it is. The
Right.
fact that they're rebooting the whole thing after this, but if they were to all of a sudden also say, "Oh, by the way, this is his last time playing the role," I'm like, it's, yeah, like the first movie made $1 billion, but this isn't exactly Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man and going out on a high note, so people want to just come and pay their respects before they recast the role. Like, this isn't that kind of a situation. So
No,
the
it's not.
only effect it would have is a negative effect. That if they say, "Oh yes, he's gonna be Lobo moving forward, and we're rebooting this universe, so please stay home and don't care about this Aquaman 2 movie," because it doesn't matter. Like, because that's what they would be saying if they. So I totally understand that, and that may be why they also never explicitly said that Ezra Miller is being recast for the Flash. And much like the Flash, much like Wonder Woman, there is no officially announced project in the new DCU so far involving Aquaman. So again, like, it's an open question. Like, now they might be waiting to make those announcements until all these movies come out. They might just not have any plans to bring those characters in until like chapter 2 or part 2 of chapter 1. So there's a lot here, a lot of context, a lot of nuance to all of this that this article completely skips over. And it gives a
Mhm.
lot of these third-party news sites, I mean, including, like us, to sort of go in and sort of editorialize around the 2 or 3 sentences in this article that mention these things
Right.
briefly. And that, I think, is like, it's damaging to DC and Warner Brothers. It's also, I think, a little irresponsible on Variety's part. Like, there should have been an editor who went into this article and cut out a lot of this, like, extra stuff, and
Yeah.
focus the article on simply the Amber Heard related stuff. Like, all of
Yeah.
this extra paragraphs in the middle just felt like extraneous to me. Speaking of which, here's the other extraneous thing. The where, again, like, they're just regardless. So, AKA, going on another tangent, some on the lot are convinced that another company, most likely Universal, will buy Warner Brothers within 2 years, making recent DC subplots and upheavals feel quaint. The bottom line is, they need to get DC to work, whether Zaslav owns it, whether Brian Roberts owns it, who's like the lead, basically the Zaslav equivalent at NBC Universal, whether somebody else owns it, like, non-Universal, somebody else buys them out. And this is Lightshed's Rich Greenfield, who's a Wall Street analyst and venture capitalist. Now, again, Wall Street analyst and venture capitalist. I'm like, what does that tell you? That tells you this is some third party person who's speculating. And I'm like, so that's a random quote that's thrown in there to support a very flimsy point that they make, the whole regardless of part. Because, like we said at the start of this whole video, who are these sources? Like,
Yeah.
who are these insiders? Like, are they, like, what level of influence do they have over the, because I guarantee you, even if Warner Brothers was, or Discovery was considering selling Warner Brothers, that information would not be getting past like the top 2 or 3 people in the company,
Yeah. It
unless
just
it was, like, very far along.
yeah.
So
It just feels like, I don't know, like just somebody was walking down the street and some bum was just talking to himself about conspiracy theories, and that's where they got all their sources. Hey, did you know that DC's being sold to Universal? It's like that's what it feels like. It
yeah,
just feels like it just like feels like one long thought that, as you said, it feels like nobody edited this. It just feels
yeah,
like, and it's just so weird. If this was like, I don't mean, but if this was like Batman news online, then I'd be like, okay, fine, like no, not hating on that, but that's more like a third party site by fans, that kind of thing. But this, yeah, it feels like it was done on, like, some like, on a blog or something, on,
Yeah,
like, a schmucky blog, like, on Tumblr or something,
yep,
not Variety. I understand, like, journalism is kinda going downhill these days, but, like, this is
yeah,
very, like,
yeah,
and I'm trying not to, like, be, like, a DC fan. I'm really not. Like, I'm trying to separate myself just as a person looking at this article. It just feels unprofessional, it feels lazy, it feels just like I've written, like, movie reviews that are more edited than this, and that's,
right,
like, my own
yeah,
opinion. It's like,
exactly.
this just feels overall ridiculous,
Mhm.
and honestly, if Variety had any balls, they'd remove this article,
Yeah,
like,
or
entirely by tomorrow.
yeah,
Like,
like, it's
they should. It just
yeah.
feels unprofessional.
Like, I agree with you, although I doubt that will happen, but absolutely,
Yeah,
like,
it won't.
at the very least, they need to go in and, like, edit out a lot of this extra stuff where
Right.
it seems
Like a
like,
heavy
the whoever, like, wrote this article, again, I'm not saying this is what happened, but it feels like based on how I'm reading how this article reads, is that they had the main story that they wanted to cover, and then over time, they've been, like, writing down, like, these other story ideas, these potential insider notes or sources, and all those, like,
right.
extra things that were on the margins kind of got thrown in. Oh, we need to find a space to put this in there. We might as well stick that in there too. Oh yeah, you know
Yeah.
what? This connects sort of to this story. Okay, put that in there too. Here's another. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, oh, I had a quote from. Okay, let me talk to this guy. Oh, okay, that supports what I found here from like a month ago. Okay, great. And again,
Yeah.
like the whole speculation, like for example, the speculation around the whole Warner Brothers is going to get sold to Universal or Disney's going to buy them or whatever. This is not the first time we have seen like analysts and industry insiders or Wall Street
Alleged.
analysts
Yeah.
predict that or try to like speculate on that. I mean, we have been speculating over Disney possibly getting bought by Apple for years. Like every year, there's that obligatory
Yeah.
article. Oh, don't count on it. Don't count on it not happening this time because it's more possible than ever based on blah 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 that happened recently. And similarly, ever since Warner Brothers has been in trouble, whether they were under AT&T and then Discovery buys them, and since Discovery has bought them, the speculation has never stopped because they're just like I mean, they're like, "Oh, yeah, Discovery did this so that they could kinda, like, clean it up a little bit and then sell it off and make a profit," and I'm like, when you people say that, like, clearly a lot of those people don't know the but how the money side of this is gonna work, because Warner
Mhm.
Brothers is not something that Discovery can make a profit off. They they bought,
No.
like they have literally billions of dollars of debt. Like, I
Right.
think Warner Brothers has more debt right now than Disney does, and Disney is worth several times more than Warner Brothers is.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And then when you look at the properties that Disney has right now in terms of like Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, like it's just they're more valuable as of right now, and not on potential, but as of right now. Like if you rather have the properties that Disney has versus Warner Brothers, I mean, like it's night and day. So like if
Yeah.
anybody like a Universal like were to buy Warner Brothers, like they would be like, okay, so they need to understand they're taking on tens of billions of dollars of debt on top of
Yeah.
it. And
Exactly.
then they have to do all the work of rehabilitating some of the like the Harry Potter franchise struggling the last that's the best way to describe it in the last decade. The
Right.
the DC franchise struggling, if not just going, into the garbage disposal like the last 10 years. Not to mention like all the stuff that with the HBO Max rebranding that has been like bad headlines. I'm like, why would Discovery go through all of this pain to then offload Warner Brothers in a couple of years? This isn't
Yeah.
exactly a fixer upper because I think that's how people are thinking about this. And I'm like, you
Right.
really got to think about why Discovery like went into this. Not to mention, Discovery is not the kind of company that's in the business of buying and selling. I mean, AT&T is a huge company compared to Discovery, and Discovery
Right.
was like very well run and still is. And when they came in and bought Warner Brothers, it wasn't something where they were like, "Oh yes, this is just gonna be a part of our, like we're gonna help use all of this entertainment to sell phone plans and everything." No, Discovery is a media company too. They're starting to be more and more integrated. And if they were to sell, it would be like all of Warner Brothers Discovery would get sold. You wouldn't just like auction off pieces of it. And David Zaslav wouldn't be going through all of that hard work to rehabilitate so many of the brands. I mean, I could see potentially like if they wanted to offload DC, but then if they wanted to offload DC or Harry Potter, I'm like, you're losing your crown jewels. So what
Yeah.
are you left with at that point?
And I
And
mean, they don't have Chris Nolan anymore because he jumped ship, so, like,
yeah,
they don't even have him
like the
anymore,
one
so it's like
Warner Brothers, like on all fronts, is like in a very weak position right now. This is not a
yeah.
very like it's a very depressed asset, and that's how it was bought from AT&T, and T, and it's not something that I think is prime for another sale this soon because
Yeah,
like
not even
Wall
2
Street
years,
hasn't been
yeah.
kind to it. I don't think they need to first be on the other side of this, trajectory where they knew when they bought him that they were going to take a big dive and on Wall Street before they were going to come out the other side if they made the right decisions. And right now, if you look at it, I think they're still kind of in that little bottom part. They might have already hit rock bottom at this point, and they may be on the upward trajectory, but they're certainly nowhere near on on the other side of the tunnel. So it's going to take at least 2 years for them to like even maybe start to see some results because again like Superman Legacy isn't coming out till 2025. Who knows, maybe till even later depending on how production goes, the post actor strike and everything. So that's just the DC side of things. We don't know how the new Harry Potter series is going to do. There's so many other things here that have to be accounted
Mhm.
for. But anyway, getting so see, this is what happens when an article goes into 20 different tangents and we
We
were
go
supposed
into
to be
20
talking
different
about
tangents.
exactly like we're supposed to be talking about Amber Heard. So all right, getting back to this article and Amber Heard. um Apparently there were at least two scenes cut from the movie featuring Amber Heard, and one was an action sequence that found Mira, her character, fighting Black Manta, who's played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and then a love scene with Momoa, which I'm like, great, I would have loved to see both of those, but if they're not in the main movie and I get them as a special like Blu-ray special deleted scene kind of a thing, I'm totally fine with that. And apparently individuals familiar with the production, which whoever they are, these individuals, again, we don't know who these people are. They were, they're saying there's evidence hiding in plain sight of friction, and that then they unfollowed them on Instagram. Oh, the whole famous thing about being unfollowed and restricting people on Instagram, I'm like, seriously? That's what you're leaning on? The
Yeah,
whole like, I mean, like, what are we, like, in grade school? Okay, I unfollowed him on social media and therefore I don't like him anymore. I restrict my account. I'm like, okay, sure, there may be some truth in that, but do we really need to lower ourselves to that level to kind of make the whole idea of two of her scenes getting cut into something controversial? Because anybody who's worked in the film industry, anybody who's even remotely worked in the film industry, or even at whatever level, like if even if you went to film school and you made a movie, you have cut scenes out. You probably
yeah,
hired somebody to like be in one or two scenes, and like, this up and coming actor, they signed on probably, and they were like, yeah, you know what, it'd be great. Like I get to do this one scene, and that scene got cut out because ultimately like you decided you didn't need it, and that
yeah,
actor's probably not happy about it because they're like, well, can I have the scene for my reel? Like, I mean, like, and that's at that level. But I'm just
right.
saying, like, it's completely normal for this to happen. Like scenes get cut all the time. Like
Yeah,
entire actors' roles get cut. Like, remember, I think was it Jenna Malone, whose entire sequence of scenes was cut from Batman v Superman's theatrical cut, and then like
yep,
the 30 minutes worth of stuff that got added in, like her entire character was erased from the theatrical cut of the movie.
yep,
I'm like, it's very common, and certainly at this level of like franchise level filmmaking where they kind of pull these movies apart in post-production, do reshoots and pull them back together and reshape them. We know that too, they had Ben Affleck and Michael Keaton's Batman at one point or another set to have a scene in this movie, and James Gunn was like, we got to take them all out now because we're not gonna want to promise anything that's not gonna come to fruition. We're going in a different
right,
direction with the DCU. This has gotta be like we can't make this movie like a sentence with a comma at the end. There's gotta be a period, a full stop. This is the end. We are moving on. So just that alone, I'm like, we're not talking about the Batman sequence. Oh, and then Michael Keaton unfollowed James Gunn on Threads. So that must mean that he doesn't like him anymore. So there's no possibility of a Batman Beyond the movie in the future. So you can forget about that. Oh, Ben Affleck, like he said that his DCU stuff is not kind of his down his alley, so he won't be interested, and therefore he unfollowed him on Facebook and doesn't like him on Twitter anymore. I'm like, why do we need all of this? Like, it's almost like this, not juvenile, but it's almost like I mean, or maybe juvenile is the right word. I'm like, why are we like
yeah,
using these juvenile like arguments to support something that has no controversy around it whatsoever? And we don't know if those scenes were even needed to be in the movie. Sometimes they cut it to
yeah,
like the movie needs to kind of go, go, go. Like you can't, if it's gonna kill the pacing of the movie because you're taking a tangent so that there's a love scene that needs to happen. Like I'm like cut it. Like I don't care. Like as a director, as a
yeah.
producer,
And
or
it
like
might
if
be
there's
too graphic or something, like, it might be a ratings thing, like, "Oh, the love scene was too graphic,
yeah,
and it made
or
it an
and
R, cut it
it's
out for
all
PG
subjective.
13."
That's a very
Yeah,
good point. It's so subjective. The MPA is so subjective about this stuff, much like movies
right.
are subjective in general. They might look at two different scenes that are virtually the same, and one of them say, okay, this movie can be PG-13, the other one's rated R for the
Right.
tiniest of things. And there's
Yeah.
countless examples of that throughout history. And filmmakers have had to kind of cut around it for that reason. I'm not saying that's what happened here because I don't even
Yeah.
know if they had the
Just
final
like
cut
a,
of the film that
an
went to the
idea.
MPA for a rating. But again, I mean, that's a good point to make. And even the fight sequence, I'm like, they decided to cut it. I'm like, it's not Mera's movie. It's just Aquaman in the title. It doesn't say
Yeah,
Mera and the Lost Kingdom. It says Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. So if you
exactly.
cut a Mera and Black Mantis fight scene, I'm like, cool. I'm sure you're gonna put it on the Blu-ray and I can watch it in my deleted scene section. I'm not
Mhm.
gonna miss all that much. Maybe the visual effects won't be there. Who cares? I'm like, it's not the end of the world. So okay, before I keep on rambling, let's go to this last point that I want to make from this article, which they do sort of end this on a bit of a bright what would you call it, like an upwards bright note. Like they say, oh yeah, the movie has been in a lot of turmoil, like aside from all this social media stuff we've been talking about and Amber Heard stuff. Apparently the testing was ho hum, and the movie sort of the first movie had the same issue, and it found its footing in post production. They did reshoots, and then of course when it came out, it made bonkers money, like $1 billion, the highest grossing movie of the DCEU. So it
Mhm.
looks like the second movie is following a similar trajectory. And then they get a quote here from Jeff Bach, who's a box office analyst with Exhibitor Relations. And he says, hey, everybody's down on DC, but there was a chance, especially with the limited competition during the holiday season, that Aquaman could still play like gangbusters because of lack of product. So yeah, he's saying like it could play like gangbusters simply because of a lack of product, simply because there's no other big movies coming out this time of year, like in December when Aquaman's going to be around. And then he continues saying sometimes the right film at the right time is all you need, which, to be quite honest with you, is exactly how I would describe the first Aquaman movie. Because
Yeah.
if you remember, that movie came out, it was the first DC movie after the whole Justice League debacle. And
Mhm.
and there was no other DC movie in 2018 other than that movie.
Yep.
Or if I remember, maybe the Birds of Prey movie might have come out earlier this year. I forget if that was the same year, but it was the first big outing after like, and by that time a lot of the uh conspiracy, not the conspiracy, but a lot of the scandalous parts of all the controversy around the Justice League movie had come to light already. And then this Aquaman movie comes out and makes $1 billion, and all of a sudden DC's like, whoa, we got something here. Maybe you got a hit
Yeah.
on our hands. And so it's like, winning makes everything better. And so to me, like all the stuff that happens leading up to the release of the film, that's like the filmic part of the filmmaking process. What I
Mhm.
care about as a fan, or as any fan should be, is like when you go to watch the movie in the theater, you should watch the movie for what it is in the theater. You shouldn't watch the movie for what it could have been when they were making it, whether it's the Amber Heard
Yeah.
sequences that got cut out, whether it's the reshoots that they did, whether it was the audience test screenings that weren't going well. Who cares? Unless you were part of that process, you do not have any actual insight or any actual like
Mhm.
legitimate footing to make those judgment calls because you weren't there. You didn't see the unfinished product. You should judge it for what you saw in the theater, the finished version of the movie. And that's my
Yeah.
attitude on it. What about you? What do you think about like all the behind the scenes stuff leading up to the release of the second Aquaman movie?
I think that analyst quote, that last paragraph, last 2 paragraphs, that's all that this article should have been. It should
Yeah.
have just maybe the drama, how that could maybe impact the movie in terms of publicity, and then, like, maybe some hope for what this could be in the theater. But then it has to go on, like, a million tangents and a million, like, rumors and a little million quarter half truths
Yeah.
to, like, make it seem like, to get people reading, I guess, but, like, I would still wanna read an article that has, like, hope for, you know, like, Jason Momoa maybe coming back, maybe not, maybe this being a success,
Yeah.
maybe not. That's a story in and of itself. You didn't need to go on a million tangents, and so I hope, I mean, do I want it to be good? Yes, of course, like, maybe the DCU to die on a decent note, I guess. Like, that would be kind of nice. But if it's not, then well, full steam ahead. It's like it's kind of a win-win, I guess. If the movie's great, then cool. it won. It died on a good note, even if a lot of the movies in the
Yeah.
past were not good. But if it doesn't, then we had the next year Creature Commandos is going to come out, and then the year after that, Legacy is going to come out, and we hope that those are great. So it in terms of going back to the article, it didn't need to go on these tangents. You could have just had that, and it would have been fine. And with that, there's hope. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Again,
Yeah.
until the movie comes out, we'll see.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. I think that's exactly what they should have been. Even if they started off with, like you said, the Amber Heard stuff, and just focus on the Amber Heard stuff. And I think like you cut out like 5 paragraphs of the extra stuff where they
Yeah.
simply are just like half of the time speculating and then naming off like random insider sources or stuff who have supposedly talked about something that may or may not happen or maybe has happened, or like some second or it seems like second or third hand information. You just focus on that, and then you talk about the movie itself. I mean, you can mention the fact that some of our scenes got cut, but don't all of a sudden make it seem controversial, because I
Hmm.
bet you there were probably other scenes cut from the movie too that had nothing to do with Amber Heard. Maybe there
Right.
were like scenes where Aquaman and his dad were hanging out together, or maybe like Aquaman and his mom were hanging out, like Nicole Kidman. What if Nicole Kidman's had a couple of scenes cut? What if Volko, like I don't even know if Volko's in this movie, to be honest, if Willem Dafoe's coming back, but maybe his
I don't
scenes
think
got
he
cut.
is. Yeah,
Yeah, like it's,
it's
or like Dolph Lundgren's scenes got cut, like who plays Mira's father. Like it's, or maybe Patrick, is it Patrick Wilson who's playing Orm?
Orm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe some of his stuff with Jason Momoa got cut. Who knows? Maybe some of Jason Momoa's scene, I guarantee you they probably cut stuff out because they did reshoots. So like, why make those, like, it just, this article does a very good job of flinging mud and then exaggerating a lot of half truths, and then
Right.
also sort of just like throwing out these random nuggets simply to sort of like almost like agitate,
Stoke the flames.
to stoke the flames. Yeah, stoking the flames of a fire that wasn't even like burning like a day ago, seemingly. So it just, and Warner Brothers did, like, I think so far the fact that they have two places in this article where DC spokesperson refutes the statements, and they do mention that Walter Hamada testified in the trial and blah blah. So like they have obviously, I think, done what they can, and I'm sure doing what they can moving forward to try to keep the bad press away from this movie, because they've got like over $200 million invested in on this, and it seems like they're even then coming under the budget that they had for this. And I'll be honest with you, while the trailer didn't necessarily like inspire me to the nth degree to be like, oh my god, this looks amazing, I can tell you the big thing that the trailer for this movie, the first trailer for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, what it did for me was it told me that they kept a lot of the good stuff from the first movie in there. But there was like that gladiator sequence where you got all those like rabid fans in the underwater, you know, what would you call it? Like, what's the one in Rome? Like, this whole um, stadium, I guess. I'm
Yeah.
like, that sequence. I'm like, yes, I want to see crazy fights and these people like, who just love the blood
Right.
sport go
Yeah.
crazy. I want to see some Atlanteans riding sharks, or like the trench being back and all those like big creatures,
Hmm.
or Jason Momoa like standing on the top of this like huge what was it, octopus or whatever. Like it's, I want to see all that crazy awesome stuff,
Yeah.
because that's what the first movie did so well, why it made
Yeah.
so much money. And I know it's probably not going to make 300 million in China or make $1 billion worldwide, but to be
Hmm.
quite frank, if this movie makes $500 million or anywhere close to it, that alone DC would take as a big success, considering what their recent track record has been. And if it's a success with the critics, like the first movie wasn't exactly like a 90% Rotten Tomatoes, but it had a decent
Right.
number. And if this movie isn't like completely rotten and it does well with the audience, then I think we're gonna have a pretty good ending to the DCEU. Certainly a better one than what we would have expected, considering the recent track record and how all the last 3 or 4 movies, or even 4 or 5 movies, basically every movie since the previous Aquaman movie, how they've all failed to make money at the box office. I think Aquaman 2 could potentially end the DCEU on a high note, and
Mhm.
maybe this movie, I bet you actually that this movie probably has some homages, like visual homages in some ways, to like the best moments of the DCEU, because I'm sure James Wan, Aquaman, and like they're aware, like Jason, they know this is the end of this continuity, and
Mhm.
they probably want to like kind of put a bow on it in some way, like their own way, pay respects to the canon that they've been a part of. So guys, let us know in the comments below. I mean, we can keep talking about this for days on end. This article was
Yeah,
extensive.
of course.
There's a lot of stuff in here that makes sense. A lot of stuff that makes completely no sense in terms of why it was included in here. Let us know in the comments below what you think. Do you think all of the Justice League is getting recast? Is it really happening? Because this article certainly doesn't cite James Gunn saying anything like that.
Mhm.
Do you know, or do you think if like that the scenes that were cut for Amber Heard, was that like, should that even be something that we should be concerned about? And are you excited and looking forward to going to see Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom in the theaters? Have you seen the trailer? Did you like the trailer? Let us know in the comments below. And of course, like and subscribe for more content like this. We're back here each and every day talking about all kinds of DC content. And I'm so glad we got a chance to talk about this one because, yeah, I've been getting
Certainly
irritated
interesting.
by the start. It was very interesting. You guys let us know what you thought about it. And of course, we'll see you back here next time on DCU Daily.